Americans also gave us the age of opulence, especially in weddings.
The people who were the multi-millionaires, the only things left for them to obtain was almost the status of royalty. So they looked to Europe for their next conquest. In fact, the Vanderbilts married off Consuelo Vanderbilt to the Duke of Marlborough in an incredibly lavish ceremony, just at the turn of the century. And of course, most people were enthralled by the opulence of these weddings, you know, by the excess of them. And this changed weddings. Weddings left the home where they usually were, and they went into hotels, or they went into resorts, or huge, huge mansions. Weddings became a showcase for the social superiority obtained through wealth.
Some of those weddings are like mergers in a way. You know, there were two huge families getting together, and it was a massive celebration where there were, you know, sometimes almost 1,000 or 2,000 guests.
And so it had a trickle-down effect. Oh, the idea of a wedding is to stun everyone. We're all supposed to become speechless by the opulence of it.
Though they definitely left a lasting impression, spectacular weddings were well and good when times were well and good. When times were tough, weddings adapted.
Well, in the Depression, the country was very poor and fabric was scarce, so it was very difficult to find fine fabrics. There wasn't a lot of money to spend on anything other than exchanging the vows and gathering a few family members together.
The honeymoon will be short, as the sergeant is due for an overseas air assignment.
Likewise, in the war years, in the 1940s, food was rationed, gas was rationed, weddings were quiet. You often saw pictures of grooms wearing uniforms, and the emphasis was on pulling the wedding together in a hurry.
During World War II, most brides wore their Sunday best for the big day. Others borrowed white dresses from family or friends, even if they didn't quite fit. Some even made dresses out of their fiancés' parachutes.
We actually had a group of bridal manufacturers go down to Congress and made a special plea for a quota of silk be made available for their use, so they could actually create the wedding gowns for the way of life that our boys were fighting to protect.
The notion that the white bridal dress was special actually got congressional approval. A wedding gown was one of the few garments specifically exempted from government rationing during World War II.
All right, boys. Now we'll have the kiss. Thank you.
The onlookers press forward to see the bride.
By the 1950s, when father always knew best, the big wedding celebration made a comeback. The American middle class was feeling flush, and with actresses like Elizabeth Taylor and others marrying in style, Americans were ready to party.
Here at the reception, the bride cuts the wedding cake for her husband and some 700 guests.
But having put a world war well behind us, culture wars began to put weddings squarely on the battlefield.
During the hippie movement and during the radical movement of students in the late 60s and early 70s, it was pretty uncool to get married. And I had this pillow that says, "Don't elope," on it.
The divorce rate was rising, marriages were coming apart, and we started looking at all conventions and saying, I don't want my wedding to be like my parents' wedding.
Weddings got groovy. Brides were barefoot, often in the garden, and sometimes out to lunch. Then in 1981, one wedding seemed to change all weddings. 58 million Americans got up at the crack of dawn to watch TV as 20-year-old Lady Diana Spencer married her Prince Charles. This was the wedding of the century. Diana's dress, a big, elaborate, pearl-encrusted, pure silk gown with a fitted bodice and an amazing 25-foot train, looked rather like a wedding cake itself. The groom was splendid in his uniform and medals.
He says, "You look wonderful." She says, "Wonderful for you."
It was, we thought at the time, a fairy tale marriage. Ultimately, we had to settle for a fairy tale wedding. But we loved it, every bit of it.
And we got to experience with our own eyes, rather than read about it in history books, the pomp, the circumstance, the ceremony, the grandeur, and all that goes with a royal wedding. And it really influenced a generation of young women. And the grand ballroom-style wedding came back.
The economic boom of the 80s turned even the biggest wedding fantasies into realities.
In the 80s, the money was spent to show people. There was this nouveau riche approach to let's have a wedding and let's display it all.
There was moments in the 80s when people would put a kilo of caviar on the table and give every guest a Tiffany gift.
But after the stock market took a dive in 1987, opulent and colossal were out. Elegant and personal were in. Style gurus such as Martha Stewart appeared with exquisite cakes, unusual flower arrangements, and plenty of advice on all things bridal. They, too, made their mark on the American wedding.
And I think that they have revolutionized what the awareness of the bridal customers. Like they give them everything that they need to know, and it's really a gift. Martha Stewart wedding is a Bible to my clients. They all seem to have it.
The couple reflects their personalities in the choices of the details at their wedding. So whether it's personalizing a bottle of wine with their own label, or having cones with flower petals from the mother's backyard, the details are very important.
And can drive a couple crazy. In fact, they say if you can get through the stress of planning a wedding, your marriage has a decent shot. You wonder how these things begin. They begin with love and hope and that little thing they call a girl's best friend. The American wedding will continue. The wedding will continue on A&E. Of beauty and tradition and love and late nights and headaches and stress. Once upon a time, all a bride needed to plan a wedding was herself, mom, and pad. Today, more and more people are turning to the specialist, the professional wedding planner.
Master and Mrs. Banks and the lovely bride. Okay, please come with me and we'll talk all about our big day, the big day for the bride.
We're living in a specialized world. If you're ill, you go to the doctor. If there's something wrong with your car, you go to the mechanic. And if you're getting married, you go to a wedding planner.
The planner will do it all, from lilies to limos. On average, they charge about 15% of a wedding's total budget. Colin Cowie has produced every kind of wedding imaginable, from intimate affairs on the beach to elaborate galas at museums and other historic sites.
You know, planning a wedding, particularly for a young person who's never done it before, it's like making a movie. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's a script that needs to be followed to make sure it has a good sense of production value.
First, decide where and when. September is gaining ground, but June has traditionally been considered the wedding month. Why is that?
June was popular from the days of the early Romans. They had a goddess named Juno. She was a protectress of women, and the month June was named after her, so it was deemed very lucky to marry in her month. June was also a good month because it took place before the harvest. All of life was governed by the cycles of nature. So if a person got married in June, in September or late August, they could still participate in the harvest, even if they had gotten pregnant right away.
The month of May was to be completely avoided. A May marriage would probably end in death or misfortune.
In fact, an old verse claims, "Marry in the month of May, and you'll surely rue the day."
There's a festival of the dead that the Romans used to celebrate, in which nearly for the entire month, women were forbidden to bathe. So you can imagine that that was not a particularly appealing time for them.
Sunday used to be the big day because no one had to work in the fields on Sunday. The Puritans put an end to that, reserving the Sabbath day for worship, not celebration. Weekday weddings then became the rule.